pay pensions to retired faculty members. What it's instead done, it's become kind of the Higgs boson particle of higher ed. It kind of holds the universe together, right? Because it's the way we unitize knowledge, it's the basis of creating and structuring courses. Those in turn structure programs. It's how we measure a student's success towards completion. It's how we actually measure the finish line. It's how we assign faculty workload. It's actually how we organize the schedule. It's how we then allocate all of our room resources. And most importantly, it's the basis for giving out $153 billion, the sustaining oxygen of higher education in federal financial aid. And there was a provision that said, however, we will allow for some other way of giving aid, and that's the direct assessment of learning. And if you think about it, and Jamie alluded to this, the credit hour is really good at one thing, saying how long someone sat at a desk. With some slight variations on internships, etc. But mostly it's about sitting. And what's variable, what's negotiable in that is how much people learn. And we're not even very clear about that, because when I get a transcript as an employer and I see that someone got a B in sociology, all I really know is that they did better than somebody who got a C or a B minus. But I don't really know what they learned along the way. I can make some suppositions about that. So what we wanted to do is flip that and say, let's make learning fixed, and let's make time the variable. Why do we care about time? And we really sort of arrived at this, inspired in part by an interview with Mohammed Yunus from the Grameen Bank, you know him as the inventor of microcredit. And they said, how did you come upon the idea of microcredit? He said, well, I was thinking about what big banks do, and I thought, what if we did everything the opposite? They lend to men, I'll lend to women. They like giving big amounts, I'll give small amounts. They make you go to the bank, I'll go to the village. They require collateral, I won't. And if you think about it, it really sort of follows nicely. So what we did is said, what if we did everything sort of opposite? So we build this stuff around workforce. Let me sit by this right side. Well, you get the longer version. I won't go long. I'll stop it. But what we ended up with was 120, so no courses, no credit hours. 120 competencies. 120 can-do statements. These are the claims we make for our graduates. This is an associate's degree. It's a two-year, ostensibly a two-year degree. In clusters. So there's a set that are foundational skills. So communication skills, critical and creative thinking, qualitative skills. Really important to employers. What some people call soft skills. The ability to de-escalate a difficult conversation, the ability to give and take instruction, the ability to work in teams. And then the closest thing we do to a major, in this case we started with sort of business essentials. And these are the kinds of can-do statements we make about this. We can negotiate with others to resolve conflicts and settle disputes. We have no idea how this resonates with employers, by the way. They say all the time to us when we meet them, if you can give me somebody who can write, so here's what we set them up. What I say is this, raise your hand, you could do this as well if you like, raise your hand if you've hired somebody with a four-year college degree who doesn't write very well. Half the hands in the room go up. Raise your hands if you've hired somebody with a four-year college degree that doesn't have good quantitative problem-solving skills, who can't navigate a spreadsheet or a balance sheet or understand basic finance. The other half of the room goes up. And then the clincher, raise your hand if you get somebody in your shop with a four-year college degree you would never put in front of an important customer or client. All the hands go up. So they love the soft skills, they love the sort of foundational skills we talked about, and sometimes competency-based education is critiqued as being too vocational. This is sort of not college work. But in fact, these students are asked to talk about and deal with ethical issues, to distinguish fact from opinion. They look at one point, there's one, so it's all, they demonstrate their mastery through projects. One of those, for example, is reading a series of articles on the philosophy of art curation, and then curating a virtual art show, and then writing the paper that explains the choices they made, why they did this and not this, and basing it in the sort of theory that they've been reading. Anybody would look at that objectively and go, yeah, that's freshman, sophomore college work. That's pretty high level critical thinking work. And you can sort of see the others I won't read to you. We assess mastery through projects. They're authentic, they're often sort of simulations of the workplace, because that's who we're working at. Our target here is the bottom 10% of wage earners in large employers, for large employer organizations. So these are typically people making minimum wage. These are not family sustaining salaries. These are $23,000 call center workers for Anthem. These are people working in a ConAgra, Troy, Ohio, ConAgra food processing plant where they make Slim Jims. These are people who are package handlers in FedEx's Memphis facility. These are municipal workers in the city of Memphis. These are people like Loeb Manufacturing, the largest manufacturer of fire suits, things that firefighters wear. These are people who have unstable employment. by the nature of work and how work is shifting in America. And for them, the lack of a college degree means that they're more vulnerable and they're unable to move up and get better work, more stable work, promotions, etc. So we have faculty that do the assessments. We've been marshaling really state-of-the-art technology. We've driven our per student cost down to $12 per student. The cost of this program is $1,250 every 6 months. So if you can go into those clusters and you've been the bookkeeper in your small family company for 10 years and you look at the math competency and you read the rubric, you go, I've got this. We'll let you take that, do the project, demonstrate the mastery of your competency. If you can do it in a week, move on. If it takes you 2 years to be a good writer because you've always struggled, why would we think that 14 weeks of freshman writing would get you there? It never does. So if it takes you 2 years, that's okay too. Everyone loves the speed stories, but in some ways I'm as enamored of the ability and flexibility to give people more time to do the things they do, because what there is not in this program is any way to slide by with a B. It's mastery or not yet, and employers love this. 30, 40 years ago, a college degree was a signal to the labor market that you knew stuff, that you could write, that you could get in front of a room, that you had critical thinking skills. Still is from a place like Bates. Isn't from the great bulk of American higher education. Employers don't trust us anymore as an industry for a lot of reasons. And you answered it when you put your hands up earlier. This is sort of how we changed, right? Time became variable, learning became non-negotiable. We moved it to be very student-centered, self-paced. There are no instructional faculty. This always shakes people up. What do you mean? There are no courses and no instructional faculty. We use mentors. We have a very strong peer-to-peer model. We use open education resources. There are no textbooks. We make some competencies are very small, so if you've been a struggling writer, your first competency might be mastering a great, well-structured paragraph. And when we did this design study with some first students, this woman said, so I wrote back and she had sort of mastered that competency. It's small, right? She wrote back and said, I never thought I could write. I'm a writer. Now, I was like, well, not really yet, but half the battle with adults is starting to think that you can do it. And then we scaffold, we build from that, right? And then student learning comes to the students. So we leverage the workplace in myriad ways. We get employers to offer up technology, mentors, counselors. They do all sorts of things to sort of help students. And when we are successful, we have people like Chris Simmons. We had our first graduate. So Chris, I love this. She finished her associate's degree from 0 to an associate's degree in 9 months, not 2 years. And this is her kids, Lauren. This is my mom. Morgan, her other daughter, yay, my mom. And this is the transformation that happens. And our fastest graduate, Zach Sherman, worked at the ConAgra plant that I mentioned, making Slim Jims on the sanitation crew from 12 to 7, 11 to 7. He's our fastest. He was the first one to complete a degree, and he went from 0 to an associate's degree in under 100 days. And he was sort of the test case, right? So first of all, I thought, holy cow, are we giving it away? Like, this guy's going too fast. Then we looked and we spent a lot of time, we poured through the system, we collect data, and he had no spouse, no kids. He'd come home, he'd shower, have breakfast, and he worked all day long, 7 days a week. All day long. We could sort of see him in the system. We tracked everything he did. He was a voracious reader, had been all his life. He had a keen mind. He had incentive because they had promised him a promotion if he got an associate's degree, college degree. And the one thing Zach never had, money. He didn't have enough money to go to community college. And ConAgra paid for his education. And it's changed his life. It'll change the life of his children, his grandchildren, everybody that comes after. That's the kind of stuff that we're capable of doing today in America. But we have to really rethink the whole notion of what education looks like. Thank you.
So Paul and I agreed would be the two-person firing line now, so now you can take shots at us and tell us why you think this is not a good idea or not good for America, or where does this fit for Bates, or whatever questions or comments you want to make. We'd love to talk with you about it. Yeah.
So I guess the first question in my mind is this idea that we have fewer jobs because technology is taking jobs away. And if we educate everyone in America, there's still not going to be enough jobs for them. So where does it fit into creating jobs? I mean, maybe.
So let me just go back. I'm talking about a sort of longer-term macro trend that people are worried about and talking about. We still, Jamie has this sort of data on a big war, pressing jobs crisis.
Yeah. So, well, yeah. First, there is a serious gap right now, right? So the gap that I mentioned, the 2/3 of the jobs compared to what we're producing now. We've got a long way to get to that point. But the way that you pose this question, I've called this before the immaculate conception theory of job creation, which is first a job gets created, then we train people for the jobs. The way jobs get created is primarily because people with talent come together and they actually create a company, they create jobs, or people within a company create jobs, or the nonprofit sector, or government, etc. The point is, as you aggregate more talent, you create more capacity to create more jobs. This has been shown over and over again, not just in our country, but what we're seeing now in much of the rest of the developed world, which is that talent really helps to create more and more jobs. So with technology, quote unquote, eliminating the jobs that we had before, what we're doing is creating new opportunities with this aggregation of talent. We're also probably creating a requirement for lifelong learning, by the way, that's another issue. But we're creating new opportunities for new kinds of jobs that we can't even imagine to be created now. We went through this as a country at least once before in the 70s, when everyone was convinced that the invention of the personal computer was going to destroy jobs in the United States. Well, they were pretty wrong about that, as that turned out. It created a different kind of economy, a knowledge economy, and that knowledge economy is really what's gotten us to this point. We're now probably at another inflection point, which is that at some point, that technology is going to create this tremendous pressure on, it will eliminate some of those jobs that it actually created in the knowledge economy. What we need is more talent to help us create more jobs in whatever that next economy will be.
Yeah, I mean, tens of thousands of data analytics people. We have an enormous need. We're not producing even a fraction of what we need to produce. So we're in that sort of flux of what this looks like.
Yes?
First of all, amazing concept. Kudos to both of you gentlemen. I think we live in a multi-dimensional society. When we talk about highs and lows, I think that's the most frightening piece, as LeBron spoke, because we are all where we are in a very comfortable position for the most part, intellectually, economically, maybe a combination, but the world is much larger than all of us in this room. Soapbox over. My question is, have you noticed different issues with your learners in terms of non-English speakers? So you talked about in your first circle, the desegregating, segregating education. Most of the population you're talking about are lower skilled English-speaking workers. Have you noticed a difference with students who English is not their first language?
So we are actually struggling with that a little bit with some of our employers in the South. That's less of an issue here in the Northeast. And trying to understand how we can better get at the ESL native language issue. And we don't have that answer yet.
It's both a complication and an opportunity for American society, right? I mean, this is part of again, back to the immigrant story, right? This has been part of what's made the country so successful and wonderful. But we have to respond to that reality and not see it as a barrier, see it as an opportunity. And unfortunately, we still have a long way to go when it comes to language and our educational system. The requirements for language are still quite poor compared to other parts of the world. There's nothing like geography to sort of change your perspective. You go to a country like the Netherlands, and you can see how, because of geography, the Dutch are very comfortable operating in a multilingual context. We're now just confronting that. Maybe our Canadian neighbors confronted it a little before us in North America. But the reality for us in the U.S. is that I think this reality is upon us, and we have to respond to it. And not responding to it, I think, comes at a pretty big price. Earl?
I'm fascinated by this model, and I love the mastery of competencies concept, but maybe I'm showing my ignorance as to how online programming actually works, or online programs work, but how do you develop those soft skills that you talked about earlier through this online model? So the gentleman that you were talking about who spent 100 days to get his degree, where's the interaction where he would develop that sense of the ability to speak in front of a group, or the ability to de-escalate a tense situation? So in the project, and some of the projects are designed so that you are working with other students who happen to be working on that same competency at that same time. So in Zach, for example, moved to
how they align, but when he moved to that particular project and that particular competency, he could no longer go solo. And in fact, if you look at it in the system, it's going to very slow down because he was going so fast and others were not at that same speed. So about 10% of our students are sprinters. So there were enough of them, that's what we call who we could sort of align him with. And then they negotiate things. They have hypotheticals where they have to sort of work through that. And they've read some things about negotiation and about how, you know, sort of active listening and all the stuff that sort of the Harvard program negotiation teaches. There's a sort of mini version of that in here, and have sort of show that and demonstrate that. And then have the other students actually contribute to his assessment and feedback, which sort of moves into the rubric, because that's part of his effective, right? How you may think you did X, but how did that actually impact other people? So we hired Kate Kazin, who was one of the senior people at ATS in assessment, to design the assessments and projects for us. We do third-party validation. We're going to test our students against national norms as well to make sure that they are what we think they are. Everything has a rubric, so every competency, every project has a rubric, so students go into it with no question about what success looks like. That same rubric is used for the assessment. We shoot for a 48-hour turnaround time on the assessments. We average 30 hours. For adult workers who are really busy, this is critical. And for them, if we let them fall off pace, they fall off. A lot of baggage that gets carried with people who have busy lives and low incomes. So, yeah, I mean, it's very powerful stuff. And, you know, 10 years ago, the question we used to ask was, how can we make an online course the equal of a traditionally delivered face-to-face course? Today, it's flipped. Today, the question is, how can we make the best face-to-face courses the equal of the best online courses? And the optics I have into my students' learning in these online environments far, far surpasses anything available on a traditional campus. Now, a place like Bates, where you have such a premium on the culture on quality of teaching, interaction, and the mentoring of the young students, you worry about this less. But on most campuses, when the faculty member closes the door, that's the last insight we get, unless there's a complaint, midterm grades, and the faulty instruments of end of the semester assessments.
Yeah, the other benefit for a place like Bates, just to be clear, so if, you know, as I said earlier, if competency is the way we're going to start defining what degrees really mean, what they represent, what you know and are able to do in order to be able to get the degree as opposed to the time spent. Places like Bates have a lot of opportunity, right? Because if you're raising the bar by getting everyone to focus on this idea that there should be a common set of competencies that everyone should have at whatever the degree level is, the Bates of the world have the capacity to then use the student experience, whether it's the research or the extracurricular or all of the things that happen at Bates, the applied learning opportunities that you can get at a place like Bates that are harder to do, to add value, to create, you know, a cadre of people who have different kinds of skills that really distinguish them in the marketplace. So this is not an either or, this is a both and. We need both of these, which is the point. And I think what's going to happen at places like Bates is that Bates isn't going to develop a college for America. What Bates is going to do is say, given that there's a college for America, what does that mean we do? How can we then build on what we already know is successful in terms of our learning-based culture and add value beyond what we know where you know, American society is really going to get. Paul did mention that they have this modest ambition at College for America to have how many students in 2 years?
300,000 students by 2018.
By 2018. So, and I think they're low. I think they're going to do better than that. Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here tonight. I'm embarrassed to say I haven't. You know, this is really my first introduction to this, so it's been really interesting.
That's why you came.
Yeah, I said thank you. So I'm curious to know, so two questions, one sort of more of a statistic. You know, I found the 15% and the 5% really interesting, Jamie, and so what I'm wondering, you know, what percent of college students are using this competency-based learning? And then I'm also interested to hear about how you partner with companies, and whether they're coming to you or you're reaching out, and how that whole partnership works.
So, if I can make a sort of broad distinction, competency-based models have been around since the 1970s. This is not by itself a new concept, but I would make a general split and say there are those that have always mapped to courses and credit hours, and what they have typically done is allowed you to sort of accelerate through that or find substitutes. So if you took AP exams, CLEP exams, higher learning assessments. Those are all substitutes, but they all map back to courses and 3 credits. What's happened now in this notion of direct assessment is that people have moved or untethered from the credit hour, and that really allows you to sort of change everything and move the focus really much more entirely to outputs. These are new. So our program is the first. It's only in April that we were approved. We actually, I don't know what we said publicly about this, but we just received a $1.8 million grant from Lumina to be a sort of convening institution of some 20 to 25 schools that are all working on this. And I think this actually, I know there's kind of MOOC mania, but MOOCs really reify very traditional notions of delivery, if you think about it. They're courses, they're talking heads. They're really, I think, as Daphne Koller said at Coursera, really the 21st century textbooks, and they allow some really interesting things. They're most profound because they're offered by elite brands. You know, if I offered a MOOC, it'd be a soup, it'd be a small open online course. I mean, if you think about it, it's free and it's from Stanford, I'm signing on, I don't care what it is, because it looks great. But I think this actually stands to be the more paradigmatic shift in higher education, because so much of what we built is based on inputs and an assumption about the outputs. Here what we're saying is, let's actually base the quality of education on discernible, demonstrated, measurable outputs, and then it allows you to be free from worrying about the inputs. Then you can experiment in really interesting ways, knowing you have the safety of testing the end result. And that's what we don't do in the traditional model. So how many books in your library? How many PhDs on your faculty? How beautiful is your student center? What is the incoming SAT scores here? All of that had to do with inputs. And the assumption was the better you were with those, the better the end product had to be. And now it's largely true in our elite institutions. That actually sort of works at a place like Bates.
Yeah.
But it doesn't work for the great bulk of higher ed.
Exactly. The other thing I'll just add about Paul mentioned the MOOC mania. So, you know, I'm in a privileged position. I get to learn about things before other people do because of the role that we have in higher education. We passed on MOOCs.